Welcome to DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the sports capital, where we shine a light on local stories from the District, Maryland, and Virginia to inform, enlighten, and inspire you. I'm Barbara Britt. Well, one of the best things about living in this area are all of the various museums that we have available to us. And some may be hidden gems, or maybe it's just a museum you need to put on your list. And my guest today is the Director of Programs at the Banneker-Douglass Museum. Sabria Hassan is joining us today on DMV Spotlight. And thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much. So the Banneker-Douglass Museum is in Annapolis.
Yes.
For folks who are not familiar. But even the site of the museum is somewhat historic, isn't it?
It is. So it's the original Mount Moriah Church that was founded by freed slaves in 1874. So very historic. We've had everyone from Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass himself spoke there, Thurgood Marshall. So yes, extremely historic.
That is amazing. You know, we forget when we live here and we drive through D.C. or Baltimore, or Annapolis, or any of these wonderful towns. So many things have happened here, right where we stand.
Yes.
We need to step up. That's what I'm speaking to myself. Anyways, and it's really right in downtown Annapolis. So if folks are familiar with that area, Ego Alley, it's up from there a little bit.
Yes, and some people think of Church Circle. So if you're ever in downtown Annapolis and you're going around that circle, we're right off Franklin Street. So 84 Franklin Street is the exact address.
It's such a pretty area. What a great time to visit the museum. And one of the reasons that that Director of Programs Sabria Hassan is here today to talk about the Banneker-Douglass Museum is that you all have a brand new exhibit that is extremely timely. It's called Public Art plus Black Voices plus Civil Rights. Walk us through how that all came together, the importance of the timing, and just how tell us about the exhibit.
Sure. Well, so the name of the exhibit actually is the Black Vote Mural Project, and all of the things that you just explained is what encompasses in that project. So public art, we are celebrating the 150th year of the 15th Amendment, which gave African-American men the right to vote after the Civil War, and then the 19th Amendment, the 100th year of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. So the museum has been transformed into 16 murals, which depict both amendments. And we actually adopted ASALA's national theme of African Americans and the vote for 2020. So like you said, it's very timely. And we're using art and creativity as a way to educate on the platform of voting.
So for folks, tell us about that connection between art and art has an ability, like music, and it's all in similar, to sort of disarm people in terms of the way that they think, and helps people think in a different way. Tell us about that process.
So I think for those who are visual learners or those who are visual in general, I believe the visual arts just really give you another way to see things. I know I was able to witness attendees of the museum this past Saturday at our opening reception who just really stood and looked at the murals. And I guess that was their time for them to really perceive what those pieces depicted. So I think it really gives you a chance to, in your mind, using visuals to really think about what's going on and what the idea is behind the art.
This is amazing that you can, just the two amendments that you mentioned, there's so much backstory to all of that we, we're not historians, but at the same time, you can tell that story accurately with these murals. So how does that get put together?
So for us at the museum, and again, as the director of programs, I work very closely with our executive director, Chanel Compton. And for this actual mural, we had a guest curator, Ms. Tamora Wright. And we sit and we brainstorm and we think about upcoming themes and how we want to, depict these themes in the museum. So our executive director is actually an artist herself. So when it comes time to then connecting with making those relationships and the artists, we really had that advantage being that she was an artist. And there was a call for art, and we received tons and tons and tons of different ideas for the murals, and the curator and director and some input from myself and other staff were really able to determine what the best of the best would be for this 2020 project.
I cannot imagine how difficult that is because everything that you get, I'm sure, is very good.
Yes.
I'm sure that that's so difficult. And you also know that somebody has shared a piece of their soul with you.
Yes.
And so you don't want to be in that position where I approve this, I reject that. And yet you still have to come up with something that's cohesive, that's going to appeal to a larger audience. How do you do that?
That and that's another thing, I think, as an artist, and as I mentioned, our executive director, who actually has a piece in one of the murals she completed. And I asked her, like, how do you do this? Because I think as an artist or as anyone, you have your own eye of what's physically pleasing to you. So I think you really have to have that scope and stick to that scope and say, does this fit the scope of what we're trying to do here at the museum with this project? And then you move forward from there, because what I may find pleasing may not be what you find pleasing. But as a group, we can come together and say, yeah, I think this is it.
And that's the important part of a mural, because it is different pieces.
There are
all
different
come
pieces,
together.
yes.
I have to circle back a little bit. What makes somebody an artist? All I can say is I know I'm not. So maybe it's one of those things where people just know I'm an artist, and other people like me say, I'm clearly not an artist.
And you know what? That's really an interesting question, because at our opening reception, when I addressed the audience, I immediately said, I'm not an artist. And my executive director said, oh, yes, she is. So I think it's, do you create? What do you create? Do you consider what you create art? I think it's really, again, back to perception. What you may consider art may not be what someone else considers art, but then the third person might consider it art. So I really think it's really about that. Like, do you create? What do you create? That's all I can think of.
That is a very, very good explanation, far better than I could have thought. And I have to ask you, for the people, I'm just identifying right now with the people whose piece maybe or their submission for this time was not chosen. How do you respond to them?
I think and again, I wasn't a part of that process, but I would think that it's, just a note. And I can imagine as an artist, you don't always get accepted. I'm sure that they've submitted before. It was an extremely hard process, and we just chose some that were, more along with the scope of what we were trying to do. Never, ever putting anyone's work down, because like you said, when you submit, your soul goes into that. Artists are there. I had the chance to watch some of the artists create on site, and you can tell.
That is absolutely amazing. So take us through that process. So then you've winnowed it down. You've gotten the ones that for this particular piece, that maybe the other people will be used another time.
Yes.
But for this particular focus on this mural, how did you then put it together?
So then you would have the artists who would submit their proposals of what they were proposing. We actually built 16 8x8 temporary walls throughout the museum. So what went up was what it was going to be. So the artists would then submit their ideas, and I'm sure receive feedback from our guest curator and our executive director about the direction that they may have been going in or where it could go. And then when they actually began the process of creating on the murals, the guest curator and executive director will actually there with them throughout that process as well.
So the artist would come in and create it right there on site.
Yes.
That sounds like its own exhibit right there.
It was. And as the director of programs, we did at times allow patrons to come in and really engage with the artists as they created, and they absolutely loved it.
That is amazing. I was wondering if they do, because I know sometimes when people are very concentrating, they're working on something, that a distraction may not be helpful to them.
Our artists were amazing because they knew we were a public space and we were open to the public while this was taking place. We did try to, limit the interactions, but when there were people who asked, can we just say hello? They were so welcoming, explaining their pieces. It was a really great process.
So as a mural, I'm picturing now all these pieces coming together in these different areas.
Yes.
So how does that portion happen?
In terms of
taking, is it each mural stands alone by itself?
Yes, they're each their own standalone mural. We have 2 levels. The actual one part of the museum called Verta Welcome Hall has 2 levels. So each 8x8 temporary wall stands alone, and that person's mural is depicted on that wall.
And do you also learn about the artist? Do they have information about the artist?
Yes.
Are most of the artists local?
Yes. So all of our artists are from the D.C. and Maryland area. Yes.
Oh, that's great. So then you're supporting the local art
Yes,
community.
that was very important. As the state's African American Museum, we wanted to make sure that we were supporting the local art community. Yes.
And how long has the Banneker-Douglass Museum been operating?
Since 1984.
That's not that long.
No, it's not that long, but yes.
I mean, it is for certain people of a certain age, but other people, it doesn't sound that long.
No, and we celebrated our 35th anniversary last year.
Congratulations.
So yes, thank you.
So for folks coming in, just walk us through a little bit. I'm speaking today with the Director of Programs at the Banneker-Douglass Museum in Annapolis, Sabria Hassan. Take us through as you first walk through the doors.
So when you first walk through the doors, you're actually going to walk in what is now our newer wing of the museum, and you'll immediately be greeted by our probably our administrative manager, Mr. LaRon Herbert. So he handles all of our tours and our visitation, and he also trains volunteer docents. So if there are individuals in the area who are interested in coming and serving as like ambassadors for the museum, he trains them in that. So then if you're interested in coming and doing a tour at the museum, that would most likely be Mr. Herbert who conducts that. So he'll immediately show you our temporary gallery space, which right now has 2 murals in it as well. But we use it, one for exhibits, pop-up exhibits, and also for programming. And that is what you'll have on our first floor. And then upstairs on our second floor, you have our permanent gallery space. And that is the space that takes you on a tour of African American history in the state of Maryland from the 1600s to the 1960s.
That's amazing. So that is the celebration of African Americans in Maryland. And that is permanently at the museum?
Yes, that is a permanent exhibit.
Have you watched people's faces when they walk through?
Yes. And that's interesting that you asked because I work there, so I'm there every day. So for me, it's this small space. And, I see it and I'm like, okay, this is great. But for people who, one, have either grown up in that area and didn't know that we were there. I've had people who have come and they see their own family members in the museum. Yes. So, and you can imagine. So, people are they're blown away because they just didn't know that history existed in that area.
That is amazing. Do you have, now you're making me think, Do you have a space for people to respond to that? An area where they can write that down, or an area? Well, see, because I'm we're on that side of the medium, but that they can say, this was my experience. I found so-and-so who I know I'm related to, or I didn't realize that was a part of their life.
No, but that is actually a great idea.
Well, I'll talk to you later. We'll have coffee later.
That's a great idea to say that, because we do. I've had people come and pull me and say, that's my great-grandfather. And I'm like, are you serious? Yeah, so it happens.
That is incredible, because I think we really do forget how connected we are to the history, not just the history of the land, the place where people's feet walked.
Yes.
Where people literally did die. I mean, especially, you drive through any area around here with Civil War history. I mean, you don't have to go very far.
You don't.
To have that happen. So, tell us, you mentioned that you have some programming that happens there. What does that entail? So
that's me. That's all me. And we'll have programming running from now until the end of the year. The exhibit is up until December 2020, the end of the year. And our first public program is March 4th, and we'll have Dr. Sharon Harley of the University of Maryland College Park in discussion about African Americans and their role in the women's suffrage movement. It's typically a role or depiction that is underlooked. So she does some deep diving into the history of African American women in that movement.
Did women of the different race, did they work together on that?
They did. It's really hard to find any.
It probably wasn't documented very well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it wasn't. You'll find some depictions that really put white women in the forefront and black women in the back, but on a lot of movements they worked extremely closely. So that's why that lecture is so important, because they're going to receive some great history around the topic.
That is fantastic. So that's March 4th, and obviously then you create these for other times in the year.
Throughout the year, yes.
Based on this exhibit.
Yes.
That's fascinating. What a great job. So then what else do you have in the pipeline possibly?
So we have two Creative Connects. These will be artist talks that will give the artists who worked on the murals a chance to come to the museum, sit on a panel, and really discuss their ideas behind their work. So during the reception this past Saturday, people they had a chance to really talk to some of the artists, but these Creative Connect events will really give you more of an idea of the inspiration of their particular pieces.
Was it emotional for the artists to do these murals?
I think so. As I was explaining to someone else, I saw tears. I heard people, a lot of the artists were younger, like millennial age. And I heard people speaking of their grandparents and what this would have meant to them, and the struggles that their grandparents experienced and how that's depicted in their work. So I can imagine it was an extremely emotional process for them.
So then when these artists come in and then share the story, now having created the mural, now standing on the other side of that, and then sharing that information.
Yes.
Now, when people hear this, can they find out about these programs online at the site?
Yes. So on our website, bdmuseum.maryland.gov, all of our year's programs are listed on the site.
And that's all you?
Yes.
That's all.
Well, no, with the help of our
many people. But this is Sabria Hassan. So, and then you mentioned on March 4th that you will have this history lesson for us on how women came together to make this happen. What else is coming up, may I ask?
Sure. So in July, we have an annual youth conference that we host, and this will be our third annual youth conference. And of course, during this conference, we're going to focus more on the importance of the vote. And what we're trying to do, too, is to keep it interesting. So not just like the vote, but really talk about other aspects of society that come along with voting. For young people, it could be education or lack of. It can be community violence. There could be multiple things that the vote inspires. So we really want to touch on those things with our public programs.
And do you get, all different people come to these programs?
All different people, yes. We get people from all throughout the state, of course. I've had people come as far as Virginia, D.C. It's the state's African American Museum, but they're public programs. All of my programs are free and open to the public. So, yeah, we just really want to be able to inspire as many people as we can.
That is amazing. I did note on the website, bdmuseum.maryland.gov, that admission to the museum is free.
It's free.
Now, we're spoiled. We live in D.C., so we're kind of used to that. I hope we have thankful hearts about it. But it is nice if you would give a donation.
Yes, we do accept donations. And then our group tours, there is a nominal fee associated with our group tours. And once they were to contact the museum and speak to our administrative manager, he would be able to usher them through that process.
So for let's say you're a teacher, or you have a church group or a scouting troop or something, and you're like, you know what, this would be something that would be fantastic.
Yes.
So how does that happen?
And and I want to back up and say our group tours there's only a charge if you're looking for a guided tour. If you're a teacher or it's a family reunion and you decide that you want to bring that group to the museum and just do a self-guided tour on your own, that's absolutely free. If you're interested in receiving a guided tour from one of our many exciting, exceptional docents, that's when you would contact. The information is there again on our website, or you can call the museum at 410-216-6190, and you'll be walked through the process of setting up that tour.
That's great. And it does add a huge dimension to have a guide. Tell us about that.
Yes, it does. And I hate to keep on driving, but our docents are so good. They just add so much more energy to the actual information that you're receiving. So although, again, just to walk through the museum, and once you come into the museum, we give you a background on what you're going to see, but to be able to walk through with an actual docent, it's an amazing experience.
I'm picturing the high school history teacher, the good one, and then the one that nobody wanted. We're not mentioning any names or any schools but you all know what I am talking about. But when you have somebody who is passionate and can make it come alive,
it stays with you forever.
It stays with you forever. That is absolutely the truth. So I do need to ask, because the museum is free, how does it get its funding? Because these things do not grow out of the ground.
They don't grow out of the ground, but we are the state's African American Museum. So a majority of our funding comes from the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. And then, of course, we accept donations, and we work closely with the Banneker-Douglass Foundation, which is a foundation that was founded by people who were really friends of the museum. So it can be someone who had family members who may have gone as far back as to the Mount Moriah Church era. But these are people who really took a liking and they understand the importance of the museum, and they created a 501c3. So we're able to apply for grants and receive funding through that platform as well.
That's great. And do they do fundraisers?
Oh, they do. They do fundraisers. I think they're really trying to build their fundraising capacity as we move forward. But yes, there is fundraising. And I'm sure as that information becomes more available, we'll make it more available to the public.
And is it an event space? I have to ask.
It is an event space. It is absolutely an event space. We have weddings there. Right now, we're actually hosting an award ceremony. The Governor's Office of Service and Volunteerism is hosting a Black History Month award ceremony. So it's a phenomenal event space. If you haven't been, you should come and see it. I think you can really make it into anything that you want it to be.
And it's not just for African American. It's for because we're all
Yes.
part of Maryland. We're all part of the same nation.
Yes,
So
yes.
everybody is welcome.
Everyone is welcome because African American history is U.S. history, right?
Amen.
So everyone is welcome, and I really love to meet people from different ethnicities who come, and they really just enjoy. And they say we didn't learn this in school, so they get to learn it through the museum, and it's a wonderful feeling.
That is fantastic. It really, really is a hidden gem. And I need to ask you, because we have this trouble here in D.C. as well. If you've been to Annapolis, you absolutely love it. Love seeing those middies walking around in their uniforms. It's hard to find parking, so let's be real.
Yes.
So obviously you all know that. That's
Yes.
not a hidden thing.
Yes.
So how do you mitigate that?
So if you do visit our website, we have multiple parking lots, paid parking lots in the area within walking distance. And actually on Saturdays and Sundays, on weekends, the city of Annapolis has one parking lot that is free and it's dedicated to the public. And that's actually where I park on some days. So it's within walking distance. And then there's off-street parking as well. So, yeah, it can be a hassle, but I think it's worth it.
Absolutely worth it. And if you don't live in that area, you make a whole day of it. I mean,
You sure can.
So much
Restaurants,
to see.
everything.
And
other historical sites.
Yeah. And do you work with other historical sites in the area? Do you all combine forces, or how does that work?
So we do. I think there can be more done, but we work closely with the Maryland State Archives just to share information. We've been conducting community forums to find out how we can work more closely with other historical sites in the area. So it is something that we have on our wish list.
Do you see people when they walk through and they see these murals, do you see something awaken in people and say, I need to find out a little bit more?
So that's very interesting that you say that. I had a couple on Saturday, and they were probably in their late 60s, early 70s, and they pulled me over and asked if they could use these images at their church. And I explained to them that it was public art, so they could use it. And they said, we need this. We need this to use to show our parishioners about the importance of voting. We really think that these murals and these images are going to help. And I almost cried because that was the point. That's what we were trying to do. So for when they said that, it was like,
Because art is not just passive.
That's right. That's right.
It's to make people think. Act, do, reflect. What a beautiful thing. Well, and I have to ask, I don't know anything about the museum world. How do you become a director of programs?
Wow. How did I become? So my background has been in youth work, youth programs. So a lot of public programs are considered educational programs. So I really just met some great people who were working in the museum world, told them I was interested. And here I am.
Now, you mentioned and we're glad, you mentioned the older couple. What happens when young people come in? Does it connect with them?
So that's actually interesting that you say that. 2 of our murals were actually done by young people. One of the murals titled Let My People Vote was done by Stewart Hill Elementary School out of Baltimore City. So it's 100% youth done. They did have an artist educator, Miss Crystal. And I really think this piece allows young people to fully connect and grasp the meaning of the exhibit. Because when you look at it, it's a beautiful piece, but it was obviously done by young people, and I think that's what that does.
Have they been back to see it?
They came on Saturday, so we got a school bus for them to come and bring their families, and they got to address the audience. It was amazing.
They must have been so proud.
They were.
What were their faces like looking at the other murals that they knew they were then a part of?
I think for them, it was, again, a connection, like, we are a part of this. Yes, you are.
That is absolutely amazing. And then I'm sure that dovetailed really nicely with some lessons that they might be learning at school.
Yes. So we were actually able to have them work with their history teacher as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
What a great combination project. So again, if you are coming in and you're listening, maybe you're a teacher, you can talk to the people in charge who will lead you through, and the docents. It's bdmuseum.maryland.gov if you want more information. My guest today on DMV Spotlight has been Sabria Hassan, the Director of Programs at the Banneker-Douglass Museum in Annapolis, right off Church Circle. And I want to just thank you so much for joining me today on DMV Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Again, that website, if you want to have more information, it's BD, like Banneker-Douglass, museum.maryland.gov. Thank you so much for joining me and listening on DMV Spotlight. I want to thank my fabulous engineer, Ken Hunter. I'm Barbara Britt on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.